Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph and we will be learning today Im Yirtzeh Hashem Daf Yud Amid Beis. However, before we get to Daf Yud Amid Beis, we have a lot of unfinished business on Daf Yud Amid Aleph, so we have to try and move somewhat quickly today, something that I'm not so in the custom of doing, but we have to push so that we remain on schedule. We are continuing to learn Hilchas netillas yadayim, and we pick up here in Siman Dalid. We have one Mishnah Berurah left in Sif Yud Dalid. So let's recapture what it is that the Mechaber has said here in Sif Yud Dalid. The Mechaber was addressing a case of somebody who got up before Alois. Somebody got up early in the morning, and when he got up, he washed netillas yadayim. The statement that the Mechaber made was that in such a case, we are now in an area of suffix. What is the suffix? The suffix is this person got up before Alois. It's possible that the Ruach Ra will descend on his hands when Alois arrives. At the crack of dawn, when Alois comes, that's the end of the night. When the night departs, it could be that the Ruach Ra will once again descend upon this person's hands, and maybe he needs to wash the netillas yadayim again in order to remove the Ruach Ra. So again, he got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. At 4 o'clock in the morning, he washed netillas yadayim. As far as the need to wash the netillas yadayim in preparation for Kriya Shema and Tefillah, he did what he needed to do, both according to the Rosh and according to the Rashba. According to the Rosh, while he was sleeping, yadayim askani yisem, he might have unclean hands now. He washed the netillas yadayim, his hands are clean. He did not go back to sleep. He's ready for Kriya Shema and for Tefillah. According to the Rashba, he woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning. He was nasa kibriya chadasha. He said moidani. He washed the netillas yadayim. He's thanking the Rabbeinu Shalom for chadashim labikarim rabba emunasecha. Fine, he could go to Kriya Shema, he can go to Tefillah. So as far as that's concerned, since he didn't go back to sleep, he's covered his bases, both according to the Rosh and according to the Rashba. The problem is Ruach Ra. It's very nice that at 4 o'clock in the morning before Alois, he washed Nangavasser 3 times on each hand. So if there was Ruach Ra on his hands, he got rid of that Ruach Ra, he disposed of the Ruach Ra. But when Alois arrives, it could be that the Ruach Ra will once again descend upon his hands. We explained that the suffix over here probably is the same suffix that we had previously as to what is the goyrim, what is the cause of the Ruach Ra. Is sleeping the cause of the Ruach Ra? In Cain, he slept, he got up 4 o'clock in the morning, he washed Nagavasser, he got rid of the Ruach Ra. He didn't go back to sleep, there's no new Ruach Ra, he's okay. But it could be that Laila, night, is goyrim the Ruach Ra. In that case, if Laila is goyrim the Ruach Ra, so even though at 4 o'clock in the morning he didn't go back to sleep, it was still night. At the crack of dawn, when night departs, now the Ruach Ra will go onto his hands, and now he needs to wash Negavasser again. Now, based on this whole discussion, if he does wash Negavasser again, is he going to make a bracha? No. Why? Because we said we never make a bracha on a washing whose only point is to remove the Ruach Ra. That's not a mitzvah. It's a practical issue. You don't want to have Ruach Ra on your hands. So if you have Ruach Ra, you have to wash your hands. But we don't make a bracha on that washing. We only make a bracha on a washing that's a mitzvah. That's either the Rosh's washing or the Rashba's washing. And indeed, the Ramah at the end of Sif Yud Dalid said, how do we dispose of the Mechaber's suffix over here? Hagav yitleim b'loy bracha. You wash your hands without making a bracha. So now let's do the final Mishnah Berurah that we had on this Sif, and then there's a discussion that we need to have. So Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Lamed Gimel says b'loy bracha. The Chavetz Chaim is a very interesting point, and to understand the Chavetz Chaim's point, it's critical that you remember the Mechaber is addressing a case where the fellow got up before Alois and he did not go back to sleep. Says the Chavetz Chaim is Katan Lamed Gimel. The Ramah said he should wash his hand below bracha. Hine nireh. The Chavetz Chaim says it would appear that afilu im bapam harishon, even if at 4 o'clock in the morning, the first time that he washed his hands, kishenot al yadav, when he washed his hands at 4 o'clock in the morning before Alois, loy berach al netillas yadayim. So this fellow got up before Alois at 4 o'clock in the morning. He washed his hands, but he didn't make a bracha on netillas yadayim. A lot of people wait to make the brachas until they get to Birchas HaShachar by davening. So at 4 o'clock in the morning, he woke up, he washed the Wasser, but he never made a bracha of al netillas yadayim. Now it's 6 o'clock in the morning, it's after Alois. He knows the halacha from learning Dirshu. I washed my hands before Alois, but now it's after Alois. Suffolk, maybe there's a ruach ra, so he went and he washed his hands again. Does he make a bracha now of al netillas yadayim? Says the Mishnah Berurah, hine nira, da afilu in bapam harishon kishenotol yadav loy birech al netillas yadayim. Even if he never made a bracha of al netillas yadayim on his first washing, mikol mokem lo yivarech ata. He cannot now make a bracha of al netillas yadayim. Wow, that's interesting. I mean, he did a full-fledged washing of negavasser at 4 o'clock in the morning. He never made a bracha. Why can't he make a bracha now? Explains the Chavetz Chaim, because let's remember, what we have seen so far consistently is that you only make a bracha of al netillas yadayim when you could fulfill the requirements of both the Rosh and the Rashba. Now, in this case, we have a problem, because while you're going to be able to fulfill the requirements of the Rashba, you're not going to be able to fulfill the requirements of the Rosh. Why? De'eich yoimar v'tzivanu al netillas yadayim. This fellow woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he washed the netillas yadayim. Now, according to the Rosh, why did you have to wash the netillas yadayim? Because when you were sleeping, yadayim askani yoseim, you may have touched unclean parts of the body. Now you have yadayim and tunafais, and you can't say Kriya Shema, you can't daven. So you need to wash the netillas yadayim. So very good. This person did that at 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, he didn't go back to sleep. 2 hours later, he washes the netillas yadayim again. Now, according to the Rosh, was there any need to wash the netillas yadayim again? No. You never went back to sleep. Now you're going to make a bracha of Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvayis v'tzivanu al netillas yadayim? Says the Chavetz Chaim, how could you do that? Haloi kvar yotza yedei chayvas hanetila latfila lodas harash kimavur bebeis Yosef. If you make a bracha of al netillas yadayim now, it looks like you're making a bracha on the netillas yadayim that you just did. But the netillas yadayim that you just did was completely unnecessary according to the Rosh. You already were mekayim the Rosh's requirement for netillas yadayim at 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, it's true you never made a bracha on that netila. But now that you made another netila now, and why did you make another netila now? You made another netila now because you know that there's a suffix, you might have ruach ra on your hands. So you made another netila now. But this netila you can't make a bracha on. You don't make a bracha on a netila to remove ruach ra. And for the Rosh, well, the netillas yadayim of the Rosh was done at 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, it's true you didn't make a bracha at 4 o'clock in the morning, but now it's too late. Now that it's 2 hours later, and you just made another netila, you can't say Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvayis v'tzivanu al netillas yadayim. Haloi kvar yotza yedei chayvas hanetila latfila lodas harash kimavur bebeis Yosef. So the problem is, you can't make a bracha now because of the Rosh. You see, the Rashba is not a problem. You might be wondering, why don't you have the same problem with the Rashba? The answer is a little bit complex, but the basic answer is, and this comes out from a Biur Halacha in the beginning of the Siman, the basic answer is that if you wash the netillas yadayim at 4 o'clock in the morning, according to the Rashba, so at 4 o'clock in the morning you wash the netillas yadayim because you are nasa kibriya chadasha. Now remember, we discussed that according to the Rashba, the bracha of Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvayis v'tzivanu al netillas yadayim is not really a brachas ha-mitzvahs. It's a brachas haidah. You're thanking the Rabbeinu Shalom for chadashim labekarim rabba emunasecha. Now it sounds a little bit funny. How does the nusach of Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvayis v'tzivanu al netillas yadayim, how is that thanking the Rabbeinu Shalom for chadashim labekarim rabba emunasecha? The answer is, because the whole reason you're washing your hands is because Chadashim Labakarim Rabba Emunasecha. So the bracha on that washing is a brachas haidah, thanking the Rabbeinu Shalom for making you a Bria Chadasha. But the bottom line is that according to the Rashba, it's a brachas haidah. So it comes out, according to the Biur Halacha, following from the Beis Yosef, it comes out that even if you wash at 4 o'clock in the morning, it's appropriate to make this bracha 2 hours later, even if you did another netillas yadayim since then, because it's part and parcel of the other birchas hashachar that you make. You say Hashem nasa al sech v'vina lavcha ben yom uvei loyla. You say shaloi asani goy, shaloi asani aved, shaloi asani isha, pekech ivrim. You also say Hashem kedishara b'b'svayis v'tzivam al netillas yadayim to thank Hashem for chadash b'labekar m'rabba amunasecha. But according to the Rush, it's a berachas hamitzvahs. You can't make a berachas hamitzvahs on the netillas yadayim that you did at 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, after alois, especially when you just did another netillas yadayim, on which it is not appropriate to make a bracha. So therefore, says the Chavetz Chaim here in Ois Katan Lamed Gimel, if you washed at 4 o'clock in the morning before alois, and now at 6 o'clock in the morning after alois you wash again, got a problem. You can't make a bracha. Because according to the Rush, there's no need for a bracha. And we don't make a bracha unless there's a need for a bracha, both according to the Rush and according to the Rashba. Nevertheless, the Chavetz Chaim says there is an eitzah. What's the eitzah? The proper thing to do would be bring yourself to a chiyuv bracha, according to the Rush. How do you do that? Use the facilities before you go daven. Now you'll have a chiyuv even according to the Rush, because now it says if you went back to sleep. You used the basic kisei, you probably touched an area of the body that's a makom mechusa. Now you have yadayim and tunafos, and now you have a chiyuv netillas yadayim, even according to the Rush. So now you have a chiyuv according to the Rush, a chiyuv according to the Rashba, and you're going to wash again because of a suffix of ruach ra, and you can make a bracha. The chanal b'sif katan dalid b'shem achai odam. Okay, so that completes sif yod dalid, but I owe you a discussion on a practical halacha. And that is the very common shiloh. What happens if you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you go to use the basic kisei? So at 2 o'clock in the morning you wake up, you stumble out of bed, you use the basic kisei, and then you go ahead and you wash negelvasser. So essentially, that seems to be the shiloh of Sif Yodalit. You washed negelvasser at 3 o'clock in the morning, which is before alois, and now you went back to sleep. So it's not the Mechaber's case of Sif Yodalit, but it's the Chavetz Chaim's case. It's the Mishnah Berurah's case in Ois Katan Lamed Aleph. In Ois Katan Lamed Aleph, the Mishnah Berurah said, what do you do if you got up before alois and then you went back to sleep? And now you got up again and you washed negelvasser again. So that's the exact scenario I just gave you. You woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you stumbled out of bed, you used the basic kisei, and you washed negelvasser. And then you went back to sleep. And then you got up at 6:30 in the morning, it's after alois, and now you're going to wash negelvasser again. Well, you're definitely going to wash negelvasser again because of ruach ra. So you're definitely going to wash negelvasser again. But now, do you make a bracha? Well, let's analyze the Rush and the Rashba. According to the Rush, you can make a bracha again. Because according to the Rush, you went back to sleep. If you went back to sleep, yadayim askani yisem, you have yadayim with two nafos. So yeah, you have a chiyuv to wash negelvasser again. So you're going to wash negelvasser again for ruach ra because of the suffix. You're going to wash negelvasser again for the Rush because yadayim askani yisem, you have yadayim with two nafos. You have to wash them because you have to go to Kriya Shema and Tefillah. But how about the Rashba? The Mishnah Berurah said in Ois Katan Lamed Aleph that for the Rashba, you have a problem. Because according to the Rashba, you're only nase bria chadasha once. So you went to sleep at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. You woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning. You were nase bria chadasha. Now you went back to sleep. You're not nase bria chadasha again. And you already washed netillas yadayim at 3 o'clock in the morning. So you're not nase bria chadasha again. So what do? Now do you have a shaila on making the bracha? So first of all, the answer is that no. You don't have a shaila because of what I said when I started the shir. According to the Rashba, you washed netillas yadayim at 3 o'clock in the morning. That was the netillah to thank Hashem for chadashim labekarim rabba amunosecha. That was the netillah of nasa kibriya chadasha. And even though you went back to sleep, and even though when you get up at 6:30 in the morning, you're going to wash the netillas yadayim again, according to the Rashba, you could still make the bracha of Hashem kedishanim b'mitzvayis of netillas yadayim because it's part and parcel of the berachas hashachar. So, very good. You can make a bracha according to the Rush because you went back to sleep. You can make a bracha according to the Rashba because it's part and parcel of the Brachas HaShachar. So the answer is, if you got up in the middle of the night and you used the Beis HaKisei and you washed Negel Wasser, when you get up in the morning, you wash Negel Wasser again, and there's no shaila you can make a bracha again. But there's another shaila. And that shaila is, if you get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you use the facilities, do you have to wash Negel Wasser? Is there a reason to wash Negel Wasser? Now, you might jump up and say, of course there's a reason to wash Negel Wasser. What is that? Well, you went to sleep at 11 o'clock at night. You got up at 3 o'clock in the morning. When you wake up, Rabbi Weiss, don't you have Ruach Ra in your hands? You're going to go use the Beis HaKisei. It's very likely that you'll touch the Piyat Tabas, right? If you go to the Beis HaKisei for Gedolim, very likely you're going to touch the Piyat Tabas. Your eyes might be itchy. You might want to rub your eyes, right? You might have some saliva in your mouth. You might want to touch your mouth. You don't want to do any of that with Ruach Ra in your hands, right? Yad lepet tikotzetz. We said the Gemara in Shabbos. If you touch your mouth before washing Negel Wasser, better your hand should be chopped off, chas v'chalila. Yad lepet tikotzetz. Yad la'ama tikotzetz. Yad lepet letabas tikotzetz. So, of course, there's a reason why you should want to wash Negel Wasser. Not so simple. Turns out that there's an Eshel Avram, the Buchacha. I mentioned this Buchacha earlier. The Buchacha wants to say that in middle of the night, there's no need to wash Negel Wasser. There's no risk of Ruach Ra in middle of the night. And he has some compelling arguments. One fascinating argument that he has is Puk Chazim Ayam Dabar. He says, take a look at the Minig Shel Olam. The Minig Shel Olam, says the Buchacha, is a woman has a baby. She wakes up in the middle of the night. The baby needs to nurse, right? She wakes up in the middle of the night. Baby's crying, especially if the baby, let's say, is sleeping in her bed, right? The baby is sleeping right next to her. She doesn't say, oh, I got to get out of bed, go wash Negel Wasser, and then come back and nurse the baby. No, she wakes up in the middle of the night. She starts nursing the baby right away. Now, what happens when a woman is nursing a baby? I don't want to be overly graphic here, but when a woman is nursing a baby, she has to touch very often the baby's mouth. Whoa, Ruach Ra. Yeah, chas chalila, you're going to put Ruach Ra in the mouth of the baby? She has to touch her own dad, which is an opening of the body, even though it's not one of the places that are mentioned in the Gemara specifically, but it is an opening in the body. What do you mean? Ruach Ra. How about the milk? The Michael, Ruach Ra. Another thing, says the Buchacha. We know that in the middle of the night, what does the Rosh say? Yadayim askani, I say. The hands are busy. They touch all sorts of areas of the body. What, you think you never touch your nose in the middle of the night? You think you never touch your ears in the middle of the night? You're rolling around in bed in the middle of the night. You're 3/4 asleep. Your ear is a little itchy. You do that. Your eyes are a little uncomfortable. You do that, right? You think you don't touch the peh, the chaitim, the aznayim, einayim? You think you don't touch any of those areas in the middle of the night? Whoa, chamir sakanta meisura. Maybe you should be mechuyev to go to sleep at night with gloves, right? We thought you only need gloves for COVID. Maybe at night before you go to sleep, you got to put on gloves to make sure that you don't touch one of these areas without washing until yadayim. You don't want to get the Ruach Ra. Okay, so some people are going to make an argument. They're going to say you're an oinus. This is not a shaila of isura, that it's not a problem because I'm an oinus. This is a shaila of sakanta. It's a practical issue. If there's Ruach Ra in the hands, so the Chazal tell us that this Ruach Ra is very dangerous for these areas of the body. If it's a sakana, you should have to go to sleep with gloves. We don't find that. So says the Buchacha, it must be that at night there's no problem of Ruach Ra. And he goes on to discuss it. It turns out that this is probably a machlokes, the Buchacha and Ben Ish Chai, but the Buchacha wants to suggest that when you go to sleep at night, there's a Ruach Ra that descends on the guf. But it kind of is dissipated throughout the entire guf. And in the middle of the night, if you take your hand and you touch your nose, you're not adding Ruach Ra to the nose. The nose also has Ruach Ra. There's a certain degree of Ruach Ra that descends on the body. When the night ends, when somebody wakes up, the Ruach Ra starts to leave the body. Maybe it's because the neshama comes back. The ruchni, the neshama, is coming back into the guf. Remember what we said. We said that when the neshama leaves the guf, that's when the ruach hatumah wants to swoop in to fill the vacuum. But now when the neshama is coming back, it chases out the ruach ra. But it chases out the ruach ra until the yadayim. And then it ends up very concentrated on the yadayim. That's when it becomes a problem if you touch an opening of the body with the hands that have concentrated ruach ra on them. So says the Bachacha, in middle of the night, no problem of ruach ra. So you wake up in the middle of the night, you don't have to wash negavasa. Now, you use the basic kisei, you have to wash your hands in order to make an asher yotzar when you come out, because you have yadayim tunafis, you have to wash your hands. But negavasa, to remove the ruach ra, no need at all. Okay, with that, now we got to press on. Says the Mechaber Sif Tezvav, 2 lines from the top of the Shulchan Aruch Yud Amud Aleph. Yashan Bayoim. Somebody goes to sleep during the day, he takes a nap. Yesh lehistapek, there is room for a doubt. Do you have to wash your hands 3 times in order to remove a ruach ra? What's the suffix? The suffix is, do you have ruach ra when you sleep during the day? What's the suffix? The suffix is shina geirim. Is sleeping the causative that makes the ruach ra descend? Or is it lila? So you go to sleep during the day, it's not lila, there's no ruach ra. On the other hand, you slept. Maybe the sleeping brings the ruach ra. What's the answer? Says the Ramah v'yitlein b'loy bracha. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah here. What's the suffix? Says the Chavetz Chaim. The suffix is the Laila, is night the Geirim of the Ruach HaTorah, or is it sleep that is Geirim, the Ruach Ra? V'davka Yoshin Shita Nishmi. Chavetz Chaim says this whole suffix only applies if you sleep Shitin Nishmi, 60 breaths. Ayin in the Bir Alacha. Dibra Maschil, David Shitin Nishman. What is the share of Shitin Nishman? L'chumra, 3 minutes. L'kula, 3 hours. We usually say a half hour. That's the middle shita. There's one shita, Shitin Nishman is 3 minutes. There's another shita, it's 3 hours. The mid-range shita seems to be slightly less than a half an hour. So, says the Chavetz Chaim, this whole suffix is only if you slept sheet and nishmi. Avapachas bizeh ein ruach ra shayra afilu balayla. Less than sheet and nishmi, there's no ruach ra even by night. Says the Mechaber Sif Tez Zayin. David HaMelech alav shalom. Haya nizar, he was very careful. Shalolishan sheet and nishmin. He never slept. Shitin Nishmin, Pirish, what a Shitin Nishmin, says the Ramah, Shishim Nishimais, 60 breaths. David HaMelech never, not by day, not by night, David HaMelech never slept for that amount of time in a row. Why? Kadesh lo yitam tam misa, because he didn't want to be toyim tam misa. What does that mean? David HaMelech didn't want to be toyim tam misa, taste the taste of death. I think what it means is David HaMelech never wanted to compromise himself to the extent that he has experienced this tam misa that allows the ruach hatumah to enter the body. So David HaMelech never slept the Shita Nishman in a row. Hagal says the Ramah, Uva Gemara Perka Yoshein, in the Gemara Perka Yoshein, Sukkah Chavava Mebeis Mashma, it is implied to Dafka Bayoim Hayanizar that David HaMelech was only careful not to sleep that amount of time by day, but by night he did, and we'll see more about that in the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Lamid Hey, Shita Nishme, Ritzayin Olayma Ritzufin. When the Mechaber says David HaMelech never slept Shita Nishme, he means straight. Ella hayamistam named kama pa'amim pachas b'shita nishmi ad chatzos alayla. Until midnight, he would sleep a little bit less than shita nishmi and get up, and then sleep a little bit less than shita nishmi and get up. And from midnight and on, hayamiskaber ka'ari, he strengthened himself like a lion to get up la'avodas habayre for Torah and for tefillah. So it doesn't mean that he never slept shita nishmi cumulative. It means he never slept Shita Nishmi in a row. Ois Katan Lamed Vav, the Ramah brought down from the Gemara in Sukkah that this was Dafka Bayoim. However, he Sigo Alav HaAchrayim, the Achrayim take issue with this Ramah, and they say, the Nimsa Sham Kain B'Gemara Rak Al HaAmoyroim. The Gemara in Sukkah is not talking about David HaMelech. The Gemara in Sukkah is talking about various Amoraim who made sure never to sleep Shita Nishmi in a row during the day. It's not talking about David HaMelech. Aval David ba'atzmai, however, David HaMelech himself, Gam b'layla hayanizar. He was careful not even to sleep Shita Nishmi by night. V'nafkamina kol zeladi done. It makes a difference to us, what we should practice. Shabal nefesh, abal nefesh. Somebody who's very concerned about the health and well-being of his nefesh, his neshama, yakmer al kol panav b'yayim, he should be stringent upon himself, at least during the day, that he should not sleep shita nishmi by day. Ve'ein Shabbos b'chlal zeh, however, you should know that Shabbos is not included in this. He brings this down from the Magen Avram, that on Shabbos, there's an oinik Shabbos to sleep on Shabbos. If somebody Pashut can't learn unless he takes a nap during the day, then certainly it is permissible for him to sleep during the day, but it shouldn't be a long nap. When he does go to take a cat nap, it shouldn't be for his own pleasure. It should only be done lishma, to help facilitate his avodas habayre. When it comes to this question of sleeping during the day, it depends on each person. What he needs to do his avodah properly. Says the Mechaber, Sif Yud Zayin, 2 lines off the bottom. Yesh Daihagen Lurchaitz PM Shacharis. There are those who have the minute to rinse their mouth in the morning, Neharirim Shebasai Chapeh, because of the shmutz, the saliva, the phlegm that is in their mouth. Says the Mishnah Berurah, why do you have to rinse your mouth? And we've quoted this previously. You're going to go to Davin, you're going to say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. You're going to be Moitzi Shem Shamayim from your peh. You have to be mishtamish with a kli shares that's nice and clean. Which keli am I referring to? Your mouth. So you have to freshen your mouth before you could say the Shem Hagadol HaKadosh VaHaNorah. By the way, it also helps to keep the kli shares of the mouth clean in the context of what you say with your mouth. Lashon Hara, Nivel Peh. A person has to make sure that his mouth is a kli shares that's worthy of verbalizing the Shem Shamayim. V'imhu istinis, and by the way, it's very important that when you learn Torah, you're sitting alone and you're learning Torah, say the words, verbalize the words. That is mekadesh your peh, when you speak out divrei Torah. V'imhu istinis, if a person is very finicky and delicate, ve'ena roitz alachnes hamayim lepiv, he doesn't want to put water in his mouth, mipnei she'enam zakim v'tzachim, if the only water he has is not clean water. I'm a little bit of this kind of istiness, and I remember sometimes when I lived in New Jersey specifically, I gained a real appreciation for New York tap water. Sometimes in Edison, I would wake up in the morning, I would turn on the water, and just the odor of the water coming from the tap would hit me, and I didn't want to put that water in my mouth. Ein makiv milavarich. Listen, b'diavad, it's very nice to have this minute to rinse your mouth. If you can't rinse your mouth because the water is not potable or palatable, then it's not ma'akiv. You're still allowed to make brachas and you're still allowed to daven. Says the Mechaber, Sif Yud Ches, bottom line Yud Amud Aleph. Elu dvarim tzrichim netila b'mayim. The following is a list of items after which you need to wash your hands with water. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Lamed Tes, B'mayim, you have to wash your hands with water. After the tefillah, when it comes to cleaning your hands in preparation for davening, v'chol shekei l'Torah, or to clean your hands so that you should be able to learn Torah, dai achar kol elu b'nikayin ba'alma. This whole list of items that we're about to mention, the Mechaber says that you need netillas b'mayim. You have to wash your hands in water. Says the Chavetz Chaim, that's not 100% precise. Why? Because it depends why you're washing your hands. Some of the items in the list that we're going to have, the reason you have to wash your hands is because these things allow ruach ra to come onto your hands. Now, incidentally, it's not necessarily the same ruach ra that we've been discussing until now, the ruach ra that you get when you're sleeping. That's the bas chayrin of the Gemara in Shabbos fame. there are many different levels and different types of ruach ra, apparently. So not all of the items that we're going to speak of bring that bas chorin ruach ra onto your hand, but they do bring some kind of ruach ra onto your hands. And in order to chase away that ruach ra, you need netillah b'mayim. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, there's another reason why you might want to wash your hands after these things. Not to unload the ruach ra, but just to allow yourself to daven, to make a bracha, to say the shame, to learn Torah. For that, you don't necessarily need mayim. For that, you just need to cleanse your hands. So again, says the Mishnah Berurah's Kat Lamates, the Bechara says that after this list of things, you need netillah b'mayim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, after l'tfilah v'choshkin l'Torah dayacha kalei l'binikayin ba'alma. To allow yourself to daven or to learn Torah, you don't necessarily need mayim after these things. You just need to clean your hands by rubbing them on something, etc. Like we're going to see later on in Sifchav Beis, the Mayri become minamita, where we talk about somebody getting out of bed in order to allow himself to daven or to learn Torah. It's enough just to cleanse his hands. He doesn't necessarily need mayim. V'choshikein be'inach, and certainly with a lot of the other entries that we're going to have in this list. Mikal Mokam, nevertheless, lehistalech ruach ra, but to get rid of the ruach ra, tzarich dafka mayim. Then you need water. Like we're going to see later on in Sif Mem Aleph. And you also don't necessarily need 3 times from a keli. Ki im become minamita. When you wake up and you get out of bed, you need 3 times from a keli. That's the bas chayrin of the Gemara in Shabbos fame. But not all of these things deposit that ruach ra in your hands. It might be a lesser ruach ra that you can get rid of with a simple netillah b'mayim. However, says the Mishnah Berurah, V'yesh machmirin, there are those who rule stringently, and he brings this down from the El Yerabba. V'yesh machmirin b'hoylech beit hamesim, somebody goes to the Beis HaChayim. Umishamish bitasa, somebody has marital relations. The be'inon gamkein shalish pa'amim, then you do need washing with a keli shalish pa'amim, or at least water from a faucet 3 times. Now, incidentally, mishamish bitasa, marital relations, that has nothing to do with ruach ra. You don't get a ruach ra from tashvish hamita. That has to do with srach tumah. That has to do with a tumah and tahara issue, not a ruach ra issue. I'm always very careful about that because I never like the indication that somehow tashvish hamita is something that brings a ruach ra. It's something. No, it's a mitzvah. It's puravu. It's mesamech. It's ishtay. It's avodas habayre. It's something that protects somebody from the Yetzer Hara. It's an elevated thing. It's not a lowly thing. It's very important that we know that. But there's a tumah and the tahara angle why you have to wash your hands after tashvish hamita. The Sefer Heichal HaKodesh says that you should also be stringent when you come out of the Beis HaKisei to wash 3 times, and that's why you see a lot of people who come out of the Beis HaKisei, they use a keli and they wash 3 times. Of the Magen Avram Siman Zayin Sasa Dvarav, however, the Magen Avram takes issue with that. Okay, now let's take a look at the list. What's the list? Says the Mechaber, top of Yud Amud Beis. Hakam me'amita. Somebody who gets out of bed. Somebody wakes up in the morning and gets out of bed. V'hayoytze mi beis hakisei umi beis hamerchatz. Somebody who exits the beis hakisei or the beis hamerchatz, a bathhouse. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut mem. V'hayoytze mi beis hakisei. Somebody who leaves the beis hakisei afilu loy asa tzrachav. Even if he did not use the facilities. Very important halacha to know. That this issue of yoytze mi beis hakisei is whether you used the facilities or not. You just went into the Beis HaKisei and came out. You still have to wash your hands. V'chein mi beis hamerchatz. So too when it comes to a bathhouse. Afilu lo rachatz sham, even if you didn't take a shower. Umishum ruach rosh shayra be'ela hamakaymes. And this has to do with a ruach ra. Now, if you take a look in the Dirshu Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan 49. Dirshu footnote number 49. Ubedin Beis HaKisei shals manenu. How about when it comes to our Beis HaKisei? Our Beis HaKisei is different because there's usually no excrement or meraglayim located in the Beis HaMerchatz. It gets flushed away. So it could be that our Beis HaMerchatz has a din of what the Gemara calls a Beis HaMerchatz shel parsiim, where there is no excrement located there, and therefore you don't necessarily have to wash your hands if you just walk in and walk out. So the Dirshu footnote over here quotes the Chazon Ish, who was misupik. He said preferably we should be machmir. The Yeshiva Zatzal in the Igros Moshe, Rav Moshe ponders the same question. Shal Sechuvas Midchas Yitzchak ponders the same question. They write that we should be machmir. So too, Rabbi Yashiv Zatzal also wrote that we should be machmir. Now that brings up a very interesting shaila, and that is you go to a regular basic kisei that we have now in our days, you do your business, you flush away the waste, and now what do? You wash your hands in the basic kisei, and then you leave. Huh? We just said, you have to wash your hands. So what does it help that you washed your hands in the Beis HaKisei? You have to wash your hands out of the Beis HaKisei. And in a chinami, a lot of people are machmir to wash their hands out of the Beis HaKisei. Don't wash your hands in the Beis HaKisei. So they discuss this shaila over here in the second paragraph. The Chazon Ish says that if you wash your hands in the Beis HaKisei, but you come out while your hands are still wet, and you dry your hands outside of the Beis HaKisei, that's okay. Shas Hachuvas Minchas Yitzchak says that it's okay in a Shas Hatchak. The Yeshiva Zatzal, Rav Moshe, Digros Moshe, I think seems to say the same thing, but definitely it would be preferential to wash your hands out of the Beis HaKisei. Now, for those of you who go to work, you work in an office building, a public building, and you have the type of Beis HaKisei that has separate stalls, and then a different area with the sinks, Pashtus, that separate area doesn't even have a din of a basic kisei, and you certainly could wash your hands over there. Okay, let's go weiter. Weiter in the list on Yud Amid Beis over here. Let's go to, we're still on the top line. We did somebody who exits the basic kisei, somebody who exits the Beis HaMerchatz. Continues the Mechaber. V'hanoitel tziparnov. Somebody cuts his nails. He has to wash. V'hacholitz min olav. Somebody takes off his shoes. He touched his shoes. He has to wash. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting mem aleph, min olav. Why do you have to wash your hands if you took off your shoes? Mishum shenegeya biyadav be'eis hachalitza. Because you touched your shoes. And the shoes, generally speaking, were mitunafais. They were dirty. Why were they dirty? Because you walked in the street. What's so dirty about walking in the street? Well, back in the day, guess what streets were full of? They were full of excrement from all of the animals that were all over the streets. Indeed, I know of at least one very chashuv of Paisik nowadays who holds that certainly b'shas atchak, in the middle of davening, in the middle of learning, you touch your shoes, you don't have to wash your hands. Because our shoes are not considered metunif, the way their shoes were called metunif. So this Paisik would say, you're in the Mismedrash, you learn your chavrusi, you touch your shoes, don't get up and go out and wash your hands. Okay, you want to rub your hand on the table, rub your hand on the table. But strictly speaking, you don't require netillas yadayim after touching shoes. Certainly, if you just touch the shoelaces, it would seem from the Paiskim that you don't need to wash your hands. If you took off your shoes using your feet and you didn't even touch your shoes, ain't sark netillah, you certainly don't need netillas yadayim. You should know that the case of somebody who takes off his shoes, and the two cases that we're going to see shortly, somebody who touches his feet and somebody who scratches his head, these have nothing to do with ruach ra. Rak mishum nekias. This is only a cleanliness issue. Al kain, and therefore ain't sarach lemar litol yod of tekef. If there's no ruach ra, you don't have to be in a rush to wash your hands. Masha ein kain be'inach. The other items, the yoytze kame amita, yoytze mi beis hakisei, yoytze mi beis hamerchatz, noitel tziparnov, those are issues of ruach ra. Masheked be'inach to be shum ruach ra. Over there, you have to try to get the ruach ra off your hands in a hurry. The chanal b'siv katan lamed ches, like we saw earlier in Mishnah Berurah ois katan lamed ches, where he said that the reason you need netillah for these things is in order to get the ruach ra off your hands. Okay, let's go weiter in the list. Second line down in the Shulchan Aruch, near the middle of the line, says the Mechaber. Well, we just saw in the Mishnah Berurah, Hanegeh baraglav ha'chayfif roishay. V'yeshoymrim, afa hoylech ben hamesim. Somebody goes into the Beis HaChayim. So he's hoylech ben hamesim. He's walking around the mesim. You need to wash because of ruach ra. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut membeis. Bein HaMesim beBeis HaKfaris. You were walking around in the Beis HaKfaris. The Kasav Maharil Siman Chav Gimel, the Maharil and Siman Chav Gimel says, Sheyesh Litol Kaidem Sheyispal Ala Kfaris, that you actually have to wash your hands in the context of the Beis HaChaim twice. Once before you go daven by the kever, and then again when you leave where the area of the kfaris are, because the ruach ra is malaviyu. He takes you out for the Beis HaKfaris. Upon him, some also have the minig then to wash their face. Now, this Maharil quoted by the Mishnah Berurah is very difficult to understand. Exactly what does he mean that you have to wash your hands twice? It seems that the Maharil might be talking about somebody was by a levaya. So if he was by the levaya, he has to wash his hands before he could be mispal by the kever, because first he has to wash his hands from being by the mace by the levaya. Then he has to wash his hands again for leaving the Beis HaKfaris. Negeya to us, you go to the Beis HaChaim, you get a ruach ra on your hands. That ruach ra is malaviyu out from the Beis HaKfaris. Now remember, could be there's a Dirshu footnote over here about this. Okay, I'm not seeing it quickly. I thought there might have been one. I don't see it. That when you leave a Beis HaChaim, so the minig is brought down not to go back into the house until you get the ruach ra off of your hands. And we saw earlier here in the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Lametes that there are those that are machmir that holich bein HaMesim you have to wash 3 times. But remember that that's a chumrah. Okay. Weiter in the list in the Mechaber. We are second line down, near the end of the line, continues the Mechaber. Omi shenoga b'meis. Somebody who touches a mace. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut mem gimel b'meis. Va'afilu mi shenichnas eitzel meis echad. Even if you go into a room where there's a mace, or you malava a mace. Na'agin b'netilla. The minig is to wash the netillas yadayim. V'na'agu lahakbid im yikanis. Oh, here it is. V'na'agu lahakbid im yikanis adam labayas acher kodim sheyirchatz. We're makbid not to go into a house before you wash. Uminig aviseinu toirahi. Weiter in the Mechaber, second line down, last word on the line. Umisha mafli kelov. Somebody who is checking his clothing for lice has to wash his hands. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut mem dalid afilu loy naga bikina. If he actually never even touched a louse, shaloi matzah. He was checking his clothing and he didn't find a louse. Still, by virtue of the fact that he checked his clothing for lice, he already has to wash his hands. Why? Could be we're afraid that he may have come into contact with a louse and not even realized it. Says the Mechaber weiter, v'hamishamish mitasai. Somebody who has marital relations has to wash his hands. V'hanageya bikina. Somebody who actually touched a louse has to wash his hands. If somebody touched a flea, that might not entail a ruach ra. That's only an inyan of cleanliness, so he just needs to clean his hands somehow. Weiter in the Mechaber, somebody who touches normally covered areas of his body. He touched his body with his hands. We're talking about if he touched an unclean area of the body. What does that mean? Where there are actual deposits of zeya, of perspiration. Says the Mechaber weiter, 3 lines down to the end of the line. If somebody engaged in any of these above listed activities and he did not wash the netillas yadayim, if he's a Talmid Chacham, he might forget his learning. If he's not a Talmid Chacham, he can lose his mind. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut mem zayin yoytze midaitai ayin bel yarabah the ritzayin alarma. What the Mechaber wants to say is that is slavish by ruach shtus. He will become possessed by a ruach shtus. Which could bring him to Averis. Like the Chazal say, the ain adam over Avera elim kein dichtas by ruach shtus. What makes somebody be over Averis? A ruach shtus. Sif Yud Tes, says the Mechaber, Hamak is dam me'ak sefayim. Somebody who engages in bloodletting. It says over here from the shoulders. V'loy natal yadav, and he does not wash netillas yadayim after bloodletting. Mefachid shiva yamim, he will be possessed by fear, by unexplained anxiety for 7 days. Hamagaleach v'loy natal yadav, somebody who takes a haircut, he shaves, and he doesn't wash his hands. Mefachid shloisha yamim, he will be possessed by an unexplained anxiety for 3 days. Hanoitel sipara v'loy natal yadav, somebody cuts his nails and doesn't wash his hands. Mefachid yamechad, he will be possessed by this unexplained anxiety for 1 day. And in all these cases, he will not understand what the anxiety is coming from. The efsher, and it's possible, says the Chavetz Chaim, aluka, somebody who engages in aluka, shekoren pivkes, a bankis, or somebody who engages in bankis. I think the first one, aluka, is bloodletting through the use of a leech, and bankis is cupping, which is not actually bloodletting. It doesn't actually draw blood out of the body, but it brings blood to the surface. Gam kein tzarich litoil. The Chavetz Chaim says it's possible that they also have to wash the netillas yadayim v'toiv lahachmir, and it would be proper to rule stringently. Brought down in the Dirshu footnotes from the Paiskim that nowadays, if you go for a blood test, you don't have to wash the netillas yadayim. That's not called bloodletting, because the blood test, the taking out of the blood, the drawing of the blood, is not being done for refuah. It's being done for diagnostic purposes, not for refuah purposes. Therefore, somehow it doesn't bring the ruach ra, and you don't have to wash your hands. Sif chaf, says the Machaber, haroichitz panav. If somebody washes his face for nigvam and he does not properly dry his face, yafeh panav mispakois, the skin of his face can come to cracks. Or it could bring boils, or a fuwasai, and the cure for this is l'irchayt harbe b'mei silka, to wash his face well with beet water. Sif Chav Aleph, says the Mechaber, tzarich lizar b'tfila oy b'achila, we have to be very stringent, very careful when it comes to davening and when it comes to eating a suda. Says the Rama, and we'll see in the Mishnah Berurah what he's referring to. We have to be careful by davening and by a suda, not to touch your calf, the yarech, or the thigh, or the other places that are typically covered. Why do we have to be careful? Because there is substance of perspiration in those areas. Milmulei zeira pirush. The Ramah says, what does this mean? Milmulei zeira. Zuama, it's a substantive shmutz. Kein sa'orim ketanim. Almost like small barley seeds. But it means that there's something palpable there. There's substance there. It's not just a little moist. There's substantive schmutz in those areas. And similarly, we have to be careful by tefillah and by suda, not to scratch the head. But to touch uncovered areas that are typically uncovered on the head or on the face, or the areas that are typically uncovered on the arms, there's no reason to be makbid. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut mem test, betfila. We have to be careful when it comes to these things by davening. V'wadin b'shashu isik b'Torah. Also, when you're learning Torah, be careful not to scratch the head, not to touch areas of the body that are normally covered. The Ramah referred us to Siman Tzadik Beis Yevav, then is Bar Sham, because it's explained over there, Shem Oimid B'Tfila, if you're in the middle of davening, V'nizkar shenaga b'makom etunuf, and you realize that you touched an unclean area of the body, so you're Milishman Esrei, and you realize you went ahead and you touched yourself in a normally covered area that's unclean, Dai menikya afar, it's enough to clean your hands with some dust, or dirt, or rub your hands on the wall or on the stender, because what else are you going to do in Milishman Esrei? However, but if you're in the middle of Kriya Shema, so you could get up and you could walk out, you should go wash your hands. Go out to the sink and wash your hands. The Ramah also sent us to Siman Kuf Samach Daled. The Shamnis Bayer, over there it's discussed. If you touched one of these areas in the middle of a Suda, you got to go wash the netillas yadayim over again. Actually, Indian Birkas on netillas yadayim, but when it comes to the Shiloh making another bracha, you don't make another bracha. Ayin Sham Mishnah Berurah. So you're in the middle of a Suda, you washed, and you're in the middle of a Suda, and you scratch your head, go back to the kitchen and wash again. But don't make another bracha. Some substance of perspiration. We have to be very careful when it comes to zeya. Because all zeya is a poison, a deadly poison. With the exception of the zeya that's on the face. From the sweat of your brow, of your face, you will eat bread. Because that sweat is not a deadly poison. But all the other sweat of the body is. Ubefanav, nun gimel, you could touch your face. You could also touch the neck until the breastbone. Which areas you could touch and which areas you cannot touch depends on the prevalent minhag hamokum. If that's an area of the body that is typically left uncovered. The areas of the arm that are typically uncovered, it's okay to touch. Perek until the joint, hanikra elenbogen, which is called the elbow. Somebody who typically walks around barefoot. If it's in an area where people walk around barefoot, then the foot is considered a place that's usually uncovered. And Baruch Hashem, with that, we make it to Sifchav Beis, and we will stop over there. And we will continue tomorrow with Sifchav Beis. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's for us, Parnasa, and Shidduchim to all those in need. And we should be zeicher to see the Bias Goyel Tzedek, B'mehera v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.